This is the Standing Committee. It is a program that brings to you activities and programs of the various standing committees of the National Assembly. In focus today is the Senate Committee on Power. And our guest today is the chairman of that committee, two-time former governor of Benue State, senator representing Benue Northeast Senatorial District of Benue State, Senator Gabril Suswam. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And I am Ignatius Nkwo. Well, Senator, sometime in 2019, when you were made chairman of this committee, we did spoke to you, recorded you on this program, and you tell us what you intend to achieve. And now we've come to the end of the road for the 9th Senate, and we want to x-ray some of those things you told Nigerians that you would do. Now we want to find out level of achievement and the challenges of this committee in the last 4 years. Now let's start with the mandate of your committee. Once again, what are the mandates of the Senate Committee on Power?
Well, thank you very much for deeming it fit to want to know what is going on in the Senate Committee on electricity, or we'll call it power. You know that the National Assembly is a lawmaking institution. So what we do in the National Assembly to make laws for the good governance of the country. In summary, that is what the National Assembly does. And so in any way that the National Assembly will intervene in helping the good governance of this country, we will do that. So in the power sector, as a committee, our responsibility as a committee is to oversight the power sector, that is the electricity sector of this country. And so far, we've done quite a lot because in the process of our oversight in the committee, we've raised a lot of questions. We've asked the minister, we've asked the head of parastatals within the power sector what they're doing in certain aspects. We, as a committee, introduced the electricity bill, which has been passed in the Senate, which is something that Nigeria have never had. We have an electricity reform bill. The reform bill was intended, which was passed in 2004, was intended to enable the federal government at that time to decouple the power sector into the different generating and distributing company that we now have. So it wasn't an electricity bill that was all encompassing. It didn't attend to most of the issues that have arisen in the power sector now. So as a committee, we decided that it was better that as a country, we have an electricity bill that is all encompassing, that is more like a compendium of everything that has to do with power. So we've passed that. It is in the House of Reps now for concurrence for the president to eventually sign into law. That bill is intended to set the ground rules for the operation of how moving forward the power sector should move. Because after the privatization of the power sector, a lot of issues have arisen which were not anticipated at the time of privatization. That bill covered all of those issues. Once that bill is signed, the power sector, we be opened up to private sector, full private sector participation. So as a committee, we have done quite a bit in the process of oversighting, like the metering program of the federal government. We as a committee insisted that the shortage of meters within the electricity sector was one of the reasons why we had shortage of power supply, epileptic power supply across the country. And the federal government decided that they were going to do what they are calling mass metering, which has helped a lot because a lot of people were bypassing meters, and so they were shortchanging the power sector of funding, and the power sector need a lot of funding. With this mass metering, there has been an improvement in the revenue that is being generated by the power company. So a couple of things that we've done. We've called a lot of hearings which were intended to improve the electricity in the country, and that has substantially done so. We've called hearing, you will recall, on the tariff, which is a big issue among Nigerians. So all of this, I think, we explain it as the interview goes on.
Okay. Now, the electricity bill has been passed by the Senate in 2022, July or June, thereabouts. So why is it, from your analysis and from what those of us who have been following that bill know, that bill tends to have great potential for the sector. So why is it being delayed in the House of Representatives? Are there controversies?
Well, there are no controversies. I am also at a loss, actually. I've had reason to interface with the Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives, who promised that they will expedite action on it. Unfortunately, up to now, that has not been done. But the good news is that the President, while we're doing the constitutional amendment, I'm a member of the committee, and so we went ahead, because even if the bill was passed without amending the Constitution, it would have been useless because it was contradicted the Constitution. Now what the President has done is to go ahead and amend the Constitution to allow what is in the bill. What is in the bill, basically, the summary of it is that now states, individuals who have capacity, are allowed to generate, transmit, and distribute power, which is something that has never existed before. So now the power sector, one would say that is completely deregulated, where you as an individual, if you have enough funding, you can go and generate your own power and transmit it and distribute it, given the capacity. So that is what basically is in the bill. There are a lot of novel provisions in the bill as well, but this is the most important one as far as Nigerians are concerned. And when I initiated the idea of the bill, we had to get the bills of the Indian electricity bill, the Brazilian electricity bill, and the Moroccan electricity bill, so as to look at it and then pick provisions in those bills that suit our own peculiarity. We're able to come up with a very comprehensive bill that covers the entire power sector. And some of those novel provisions is what I've mentioned here, where any person now who has a capacity can generate, transmit, and distribute power. And the President have gone ahead because we amended the Constitution to allow that to happen. What the bill has done is just to set the ground rules for the operation. And I believe that before the 9th Assembly rounds up, that bill will be passed, will be concurred in the House, and then the President will assent to it, because he has already done the needful by signing the provisions for the amendment of the Constitution that allowed that to happen.
To get this more clearly, you just gave reference to the Consolidated Operation Bill that has empowered the states to generate and distribute power. But then you still explained that the Electricity Bill 2022 will now empower individuals to have such capacity. So is it the same with, since Constitution is empowering only the state, so is it, how does it cover?
No, it's not empowering just the state. It's empowering the entire private sector. If a state has the capacity, they should be able to do that. If a corporate body or an individual has the capacity, he can generate, transmit, and distribute power. That provision is very novel. It's absolutely very important. It has created a situation where they've taken off the monopoly of the federal government completely from the power sector. Now, there's no monopoly. if I, as an individual, have the capacity, I can go ahead and generate power.
With the privatization, do we still have monopoly?
No, yes. When you move from government monopoly, it was appearing as if the private sector people that bought those entities themselves were forming themselves into monopolies because they had some representative of those companies. For instance, the Gencos have a representative who talk for and on behalf of the Gencos. So they're sort of creating a cartel among themselves, which eventually, as you know, will lead to a monopoly. And so to further decouple that monopoly, this bill and the amendment of the Constitution have allowed states, individuals to generate power and distribute. And I believe that will help a lot because you have what you call embedded power generation, where if an individual decides to operate within a particular area, he or she can generate power and distribute only within Metama here, for instance. And the charges will be different, of course. So Metama will have 24/7 power coming from that source. So you're going to have people who will generate power in the villages and distribute to those people who have 24/7 power. We have done quite a lot, and the amendment of the Constitution as signed by the President has opened up the electricity sector to all to come in and operate. And I want to tell you that is exactly what is happening in China and India. These are countries where there is about 90% accessibility of electricity by the rural populace. And this electricity is not, so to speak, completely generated by the federal government of those countries. Most of them are from the private sector, but they're generating to cover the entire country. And most of these countries have 90% accessibility of electricity. For instance, Brazil, which is supposedly a developing economy just like ours, have almost 90% accessibility of electricity in the rural areas. And those are not necessarily from the federal government of that country. Those are from private sector generators and distributors.
So what's the percentage of Nigeria? If Brazil is 90%?
No, our own is abysmal. It's very, very, very abysmal. It's not up to 40%. It's not up to 40%. And so the Rural Electrification Agency was set up for the sole purpose of creating accessibility for the rural populace. It is still developing. They're working hard. They have introduced mini grids. Those mini grids, you have a couple of them scattered here and there in the country. I think eventually, if they are properly funded, we will also have the Rural Electrification Agency giving power to the rural people using the renewable energy, especially solar, to do that.
The Ninth Assembly convened two major and critical roundtable, and one of them, in fact, one of them is the power, and the other one on security. Now, can you tell us what actually was the intent of that roundtable, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, that when we came in the National Assembly, in the Ninth Assembly, there were a lot of complaints, and the power supply in the country was very bad. And in spite of the privatization or the decoupling of the power sector, the essence of decoupling the power sector was to create efficiency in the electricity sector of this country. Unfortunately, that was not to be. And so when we came in the Ninth Assembly, it became imperative on us as a representative of the people to seek to know why, in spite of the privatization, we're still having very serious power supply issue in the country. And so there was a need for us to invite stakeholders in the power sector to come and talk to us about what is going on in the power sector. And so the intention of that um, um, meeting was for us to be briefed, was for us to be um, put in the know of what we needed to do from the legislative side so as to assist um, the uh, presidency on what they need to do in order to improve uh, supply of power in this country. And we achieved that substantially. And that is what led to some of the subsequent hearings that we had in the power sector, where we talked about the issue of metering. We now knew that metering was one of the major issues in the power sector. And then we had other issues of the decay or the deficit in the infrastructure in the power sector, where you have a lot of technical and commercial losses in the sector. This arising from that meeting that we're told that these are some of the major issues that are hindering consistent power supply in this country. And so we went to work. There has been a lot of improvement. The federal government also stepped up their intervention in the power sector. You know that there is intervention of about 1.6 trillion, and the federal government have not stopped intervening. There are subsequent interventions in the distribution sector of the country so as to improve power distribution. You know of the cement intervention, which is ongoing now. There's a federal government power company that has been set up specifically to intervene in the transmission and distribution subsector of the power sector. So that meeting that we had, which you've mentioned, did a lot for us, and also, like I've mentioned before, it is arising from that we're able to come out with the electricity bill, which this country doesn't have up to now. And once the president signed it, it will be the first time that Nigeria will be having a compendium of that kind of thing in the power sector. A compendium of law guiding the power sector. Otherwise, we've never had it. And so that meeting achieved a lot after that. After the meeting, we've achieved a lot.
Now, this issue of Siemens, some people have referred to it as a project that is being stunted. What is the problem with that project, and what is the status?
Well, I wouldn't say that the project is stunted. I would say that there have been delays arising from the fact that the person who was the main anchor of that project actually died. That was the late chief of staff to President Buhari. He was the main anchor of that project. And so when he died, there was a need to restart it again. The new chief of staff was not in know. He apparently didn't have the same vision as the late chief of staff. So there were some delays, but it has picked up. Not going on the way that I would have wanted, but it's going on. Some monies have been released to them, the Nigerian counterpart funding, because it was 75%, 25%. The cement, the German government was supposed to bring in 75%, while we funded with 25%. Part of our counterpart funding, about $100 million, has been released to cement, and manufacturing have started. I believe that by the third quarter of this year, they will go to work, because from what we've seen, the project has taken off in terms of manufacturing, because after payment, most of this equipment need to be manufactured. It's like serving a la carte. It's not something that was manufactured and kept. It is after you paid and show some commitment the German government wanted Nigeria to show some commitment. That commitment has been shown by the payment of about $100 million to the German government through cement. So it's not stunted, it's delayed, yes, but it is on steam now.
Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of sectors were affected, and the power sector was not different. How did your committee intervene in that sector at that period?
Yeah, you know that especially in the area of tariff, most people at that time didn't have the capacity to pay tariff. So you will recall that the Speaker of the House of Reps had moved at that time that the federal government should actually write off some of those bills at that time. Bills were not necessarily written off, but tariffed. There was an arrangement where for the low-income earners, there were subsidy that were given to them during that period of the COVID, so as to mitigate the pains that they were going through. So mostly low-income earners were targeted for the subsidy during the COVID period. And as a committee, we moved the motion. We called the regulator, NEC, to make sure that that was implemented, and it was implemented.
Okay, I think that's a good one. Though I can't remember if I was part of it.
You know, one thing with the electricity tariff is that if it is increased, you will notice it. If it is not increased, you don't bother yourself about it. It is only when it's increased that people complain. So at that time, there was no increase in electricity. You know, they have what they call MITO. MITO is set on default.
Okay.
And so it increases periodically. Okay. So we had to stop them from activating that MITO. MITO is a system of tariff that they have adopted in this country. So that is set on default, where from periodically it increases. I think after every 6 months or so. But within this period, we'll make sure that that wasn't activated. And so people didn't notice it, but that was done by...
So automatically it activates the increment process?
The increment process, based on certain parameters. Okay. The parameters is not just something that is done haphazardly. Okay. It is based on certain parameters.
All right. Now let's take a look at the Zungeru power plant. This is one of the areas that Nigerians really expected so much intervention of the Senate. What is the status of the Zungeru power plant, and then the issue of the concessioning? I know there was a public hearing that your committee convened recently. Now tell Nigerians what is the stance of the Senate on that Zungeru power plant concessioning.
You know, Zungeru power plant is one of these very big power plants that the federal government is constructing in order to enhance power supply. It's about 700 megawatts of power. Power plant completed 90%, built with a sum of $1.2 billion. And the federal government decided in its own wisdom to concession the plant to any worthy private sector entity. And they started the process. And at the National Assembly, especially in the Senate, we noticed that there were some gaps in what they were doing. And so we decided to move a motion in the Senate that mandated us as a committee to investigate the issues surrounding the concessioning of Zungeru power plant, which has not been completed. And so we invited the stakeholders who came, and we interfaced with them, and we discovered quite a bit. First, the plant is completed 90%, but there are that, you know, would not have necessarily made them to concession the power plant at this period. And we're wondering why the rush. And they say that what we were told was that by the time the power plant will be completed at the end of this year or next year, they want a system in place so that there's no gap. But unfortunately, what we've discovered is that in spite of the work on the plant itself, the transmission lines that will evacuate power from Zungeru have not yet even started, partly because of the security situation in that area. And we're wondering, if we have a power plant that you cannot evacuate power, it's as good as you have no power plant. Because the essence of a power plant is to send electricity out to the people. If you've completed the main plant itself and the transmission line, both the 132 and the 330 lines, they have not even started constructing them. Like I say, partly because of the security situation in that area. And so why do you concession it? And any person who is picking that up will not pay anything reasonable to the federal government, because you are buying a plant that you cannot evacuate power. And you know that when you do your due diligence, there's no way any person is going to offer anything reasonable. And those are our concerned. We've done a report. That report will be presented to the Senate, and we believe that based on our findings and our recommendations, the Senate will go further to probably invite the DG of BP, Minister of Power, and the ICRC, that is the Infrastructure Concessioning body that is saddled with the responsibility of concessioning such entities of the federal government. But what I would like to say in summary is that the power is not yet ready for any concessioning, except we want to give it away at a cheap rate after spending 1.2 billion. And these monies have basically been all paid to the construction company. So Zungeru Power Plant, good, beautiful plant, 700 megawatts of power in there. And completed the main plant, but the transmission line for evacuation are not yet there. And so it's as good as we don't have a plant. We can't evacuate it. There's no plant. So why rush to concession it now? That is the question that we're still asking. And from the finding, like I said, I'm just mentioning the main issue. The other ancillary issues that would not make it possible for them to concession this power plant until 2024, when the power plant would have completely been finished and tested. You know, they have a default period. That default period, what that means is that within that period, they are meant to have finished the plant. And that default period of about 1 year is when they will test the plant to be sure that we actually have 700 megawatts of power in that plant. All of this has not been done, and you want to concession it.
Okay, now, but there was a motion where the Senate resolved that concessioning should be put on hold. Is that motion still, does it still subsist?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That motion also mandated the Power Committee to investigate. We did our investigation, and we're presenting the report to the Senate for consideration. It will be the decision of the Senate, given the findings and the recommendations that are in that report, for the Senate to take the next step and next action as far as the issue of concession of Zungeru is concerned.
Now, Nigeria's power national grid has collapsed for more than 6-7 times within a space of 1 year. Are you not worried, and what has been the committee's intervention?
You also recall that we invited TCN and some other stakeholders to come and brief us as to why the incessant collapse of the national grid. And we were told a lot of things. First, the deficit and the decay in the infrastructure in the power sector, which, like I said, part of the cement agreement is to address that infrastructure decay both in the transmission and the distribution subsector of the power sector. Now, the other issues of ineptitude on the part of those managing those lines, and that also became very clear to us that people with capacity, people who have the ability, people who know what they're doing, people who have the commitment should be put in place to oversee the transmission line of this country. We have people with no commitment at all, and most time you have inept individuals who are put in control of those assets who don't know what they're doing. And so we will continue to have this grid collapse uh, that you mentioned here. So there's a whole lot that need to be done for us to avoid that. First, we need to have modern equipment that could dictate, in developed climes, if you are going to have a grid collapse or problem on the grid, it is anticipated because there are machines that anticipate that this problem is going to happen. We don't have any of such, and that we need to put in place so that we can anticipate that this grid is going to have problem in the next few days. And once you anticipate the problem that can be solved, you go ahead and solve it. We don't have such equipment. That is very fundamental if we must stop the incessant grid collapse. And then the issue of individuals who are put to man this asset. Majority of them are people who have been there for years, who do not know that power itself has become dynamic. There are a lot of things that they don't know. They just have a routine that they've been doing for over the years, and that no longer fits in what we now have. So such individuals should be retrained, or new individuals with new knowledge should be brought in so that they will be able to address the dynamism that is now within the power sector, not during the NEPA time where you have just very little infrastructure to address. Now everything is expanded, so more sophisticated. So we need to introduce sophistication technology, modern technology, in the transmission line of this country. So infrastructure is very key, and then capable hands are also very important and consequential in making sure that we don't have this grid collapse as incessant as we've had in the past.
Well, it will quite disheartening that there have been a lot of criticism against that, but we believe that these engagements we'll begin to see some changes. But we'll take a short break now. When we come back, our discussion continues. Welcome back to the program, the Standing Committees. I am Ignatius Unko, and our guest has been the Chairman Senate Committee on Power, Senator Gabril Suswam. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, there's been this issue of huge debt facing Nigeria's power sector that has been affecting the investment. How do you see this? And is it beyond the purview of your office to intervene to that regard?
Yeah, the debt issue is a very serious problem in the power sector. Debt, first, let's talk about the debt that the federal government is owing the generating company. And then you have other debt issues that are being handled by NEMCO, which is the agency that is saddled to handle the liabilities that arose as a result of the decoupling of the power sector. Those are legacy debt. You talk about legacy debt in the power sector. Those ones are being handled by that agency. debts that were outstanding at the time that the power sector was privatized. That is a different one. But the major one, which is a cause for concern, is the one by owned to the Gencos, who are the generators. There was this program of intervention by the federal government where about 1.6 trillion has already been expended. The intention was that where the discos were unable to meet up with their remittance, the federal government, it was more like a subsidy. The federal government would step in, and there were monies that were set aside. The initial intervention was about, I think, 600 billion. Subsequent 300 billion, like that. It has amounted to about 1.6 trillion of intervention by the federal government, which was what this federal government was doing to keep the generators keep generating power, to keep the distributors keep distributing power and giving power to Nigerians. Unfortunately, that money has built up so much that the federal government decided that, wait a minute, are we going to continue to spend money in a sector where we have privatized in order to create efficiency? And most people felt that it was money that was going down the drain. This money is, first and foremost, you have generators who were generating power and also buying gas. They needed to pay for that gas. As they generate power, they transmit that power to an agency of government called MBET that was a holding agency that will now distribute that power to the discos. Now, the discos say that they were unable to collect revenues enough for them to meet up with the receipt that were being sent to them by the generators. And so the federal government decided that it's okay, will we come in where you can't meet up the difference? We'll set money aside that will be paid to the disco so that the discos will continue to generate. But that money became too much. And NEC stepped in to say, look, discos, what are the issues? What is the problem? Why can't you meet up with the remittance so as to be able to pay your bills to the generators? And it has been back and forth. The disco said, look, federal government is owing us a lot of money, which is true anyway, because you have a lot of ministries and departments that are owing huge amount of bills, especially military barracks, police barracks, even the National Secretariat. There are huge bills that are owing to this. They say, look, we can't meet up our remittance because you as federal government, yourself, you are owing us billions of naira. And that has not been addressed. And so the federal government said, look, we can also continue to intervene with these huge amounts of money. So we have run into problems the way forward. You now see that there's very high rate of shortage of power supply in the country now. Most people are not talking about it, but the discourse are saying, the Gencos are saying, look, we're being owed so much money. We cannot continue to buy gas and generate power, and we're not paid because we also need to pay the gas suppliers. And so it's becoming a bit complicated. And if the federal government do not come back and step in, of course, we're going to have a lot of problems. Gas suppliers say, look, we will not supply gas to the generators. And if there's no gas, because most of the power plants are thermal power plants. We have 11, more than 11, those are the ones owned by government, about 11 thermal power plants owned by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company of Nigeria. You have individuals like Azura Power Plant, which are owned by individuals. Those are all thermal power plants. Then we have the hydro. The hydros are not many, I think 3 or 4 in this country. And so basically we need gas if we must ramp up our power supply in this country. And they need payment. that money is not there, so there is real debt. And so if we don't take time, and I pray that the new government that is coming in should pay particular attention to the power sector. Otherwise, we wake up one day and the entire power supply in this country will collapse irretrievably, completely. That is, will collapse completely because there will be no money for the generators to generate, to buy gas and generate power. And so when you now depend only on the hydropower plants, which if we put all of them together, they don't generate. I think they generate about 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts of power, which is grossly inadequate in a country that has grown to the extent that we are. So we need to address the issue of the debt in the power sector. And that can only be addressed by the incoming government. And I'm praying that the president-elect should pay particular attention to the power sector, because if we have it right, the GDP of the country will also be enhanced. It will be enhanced because there will be aggregate economic activities in the country that will make it possible for the GDP of the country to be enhanced. There will be industries that will come on stream, employment will come in, business will be enhanced. And so once you have commerce going on, GDP of the country will be enhanced, people will be happy, industries will be up. So Nigeria will come back as a producing country other than the consumption. You know, now we are basically consuming as a country. Even toothpick, you can hardly produce them because the cost of production is very high.
But then, sorry for cutting you short. I don't know. You are laying emphasis on financing, but some pundits have explained that the problem with the power sector is not just not the funds that the successive governments have provided funds from 1999. No, annually about $2 million, and still there's no significant improvement. And I hear you're saying that you're still taking a look, you're still believing that when there is more funding, that the sector will improve. Is it just like that?
Like I say, the essence of privatization was to introduce new liquidity in the sector. The essence of the privatization was to create efficiency, among other things. Unfortunately, the foundation of the privatization was faulty. If we look at the PPAs, the power purchase agreement, and some of the agreement that were signed at the time of privatization, you can fault a whole lot in it. The federal government that privatized it in themselves have breached most of the provisions in those PPAs. And so the new owners of these entities say, look, if the federal government that owns 40%, especially the distribution companies, have themselves breached the provisions of this, then it's no longer incumbent on us to also perform maximally. And that is what has happened. It is not as if these private companies have just decided to stay back and not do anything. They have tried. But to say that they are also not at fault totally is not correct, because most of the interventions were monies that were basically shares by the owners of these distribution companies. That is also true, because there are some companies, I don't want to mention names, but there are companies that have been taken up by the regulator NEC as to what happened to some of the monies that the federal government put, especially in enhancing their infrastructure so that there can be more efficiency in the sector. People who are saying that monies have been spent, that is true. When President Obasanjo started the idea of privatization, he had hoped that privatization would bring in efficiency and introduce new liquidity in the sector. President Yaradua picked it up and more or less completed the process, also hoping that that would be the case. As a governor then, we were called by the president then, may he so rest in peace, President Yaradua, for us to make our own contribution so that he will complete what Obasanjo started. That is the completion of the thermal power plant that Obasanjo had initiated. Now, those monies were spent in the construction of those companies. So when people talk about money has been spent, money was spent for the construction of the power plants under the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, which are called NRPP power plants. You know, so it wasn't money that were given to people for construction. That is one. After that, you now decoupled the sector. People took over. And you needed to continue to subsidize for Nigerians. That subsidy is absolutely very important because all over the world, there are some level of subsidies that government, even in developed economies, power sector is subsidized. So there is no way that out of the blues, the federal government will stop subsidy here. Look at the example of them trying to stop subsidy in the PMC, in the petroleum industry. Look at the crisis that it has generated. Now, power is as good as petrol. So the federal government needed to continue to subsidize the sector until such a time that Nigerians will be able to stand and be able to pay their bills. As it is now, our economy has virtually collapsed. Look at the inflation rate. The inflation rate is unofficially, the inflation rate in this country, I saw it on Senate, unofficially is up to 50 something. Officially here they are saying it's 20 something. But inflation rate that have gone to that level, how do you expect a ordinary individual to pay bills such as electricity bill when the tariff have continued to increase from time to time? So no amount of money spent in the power sector is enough until we stabilize it. And the government needed to have been more serious in stabilizing the power sector than they have done. That has not been done. And so government need to continue to spend money.
Mr. Chairman, don't you think that with the amount of money that government have injected into the power sector, and with what we see that's happening, now you've talked about subsidy, the need to continue to subsidize the sector, like the PMS you just talked about. Those subsidy comes with visible impact on the pockets of Nigerians. We see that they will say, we are supposed to pay this, but with the subsidy, this is what we're paying. But out of the power sector, I'm telling you, people don't see it that way.
Yes. Like I've told you, it is only when there's an increased tariff in electricity that you see a lot of complaint. I also don't agree with what is happening in the power sector. I've been very instrumental in some of the changes. As a committee chairman, as a committee, we've been very instrumental in some of the changes that Nigeria have witnessed because we brought new perspective to the way that the place should be run. I agree totally with Nigerians that what is happening in the power sector is not correct and something should be done. This sector is put in private hands. They're supposed to bring their own money. It is government money that they're still using. Why? And there are reasons for it. I've mentioned some of them. The government is supposed to be paying bills too. If we see a lot of these departments and ministries are own hundreds of billions of naira to these distribution companies. Government is supposed to address that. That has not been addressed. And so how do you expect them? For instance, a particular generator generates about 100 megawatts and invoice that to a distribution company to pay X amount of money. This distribution company is supposed to collect money for them to pay that invoice. Now, government is owing them half of their money that's supposed to remit. There's no way that they can do that. And so, will you hold them responsible or hold the government responsible? That is where the problem is.
It's a big problem.
It's a big problem. And that is why I say that the incoming government, if they focus, if their priority is just power, they will change this country. Because a lot of industries have collapsed completely. Most of industries have moved to Ghana. And you know the irony of it. Nigeria supplied gas to the power company in Ghana. Ghana has more consistent power supply than us. Meanwhile, the source of that power, which is gas, is supplied by Nigeria. The same pipeline that take gas to Papalanto power plant is the same gas pipeline that take gas to Ghana. And Ghana has more consistent power. So most of the companies in Nigeria are moving to Ghana. In fact, I've heard that Guinness also intend to move to Ghana. And you know Guinness is one of the biggest, most stable company, multinational company that we have in this country. Even in terms of paying tax, see what this country will lose if Guinness move. They are moving because their cost of production have increased tremendously because of inconsistent power supply. So they're operating on their own personal generator. Gas, you know the cost of gas now, is prohibitive. And so we need to be serious with power if we need to put the economy of this country right. And that is what the new government, incoming government, should focus on. This past government have put in a lot of money, but there has been no proper focus. You know, you can't just, even if you are doing business, every day you come and put money and you are not monitoring it, you are not focused on it. That is a problem. Good enough, the new Minister of Power, who just came, has tried to put things in perspective. But, you know, he has a very short time, and I believe that the efforts that he's making, because of the lack of time that he has, he will leave by May 29. There's nothing much that he would have achieved by the time he's leaving. But the next government will have 4 years. All they need to do is to get people who know what they're doing, serious-minded people in the power sector. And then the economy of this country, just by addressing the power sector problem, the economy of this country will be changed. So I agreed, a lot of money has been spent in the power sector with no commensurate result. That is also true.
Exactly.
There is no commensurate result. But it is because it is not being properly monitored. That is why there just seems as if money is going down the drain. To some extent, that is also true.
Do you still believe that this huge debt that is affecting these companies is the fact that the valuation of Nigerian currency too, because some of these investments took place when the dollar to naira was low?
If we have a producing economy, we will not have this yo-yo movement of the dollar. We will not have. All of this is tied together. You fix the power sector, Nigeria become a producing country, the dollar, the exchange rate become very stable. And that changes a whole lot of things. That's why I'm saying that a government that focuses just on changing the power sector will change the entire economy. This yo-yo movement, every day you plan, they say the dollar or the pounds is today 1,000 to 1 pound, or 750 to $1. You woke up this following day is 760. So there's no way that a serious-minded investor can come and invest in this country where there's high level of instability in the currency sector. You look at the MPA that the central bank just came out with. How do you put the rate when you put it at 11 or 14%? Then the commercial banks put it at 30-something. Because if you go to borrow money in the commercial bank now, it's prohibitive. There's no way that you, who is a struggling business person, can go to the commercial bank because the foundation is 40 at the central bank. The central bank, the foundation is very 40. So all of this is tied down to the issue of power supply in this country. You go to Kaduna, the textile industry, that was a booming industry there, is completely dead. You go to everywhere. People who have small businesses can't operate them any longer. They have closed shop. and have gone. You know, I give you an example. Whilst I was governor in Benue, there was this Korean company that were producing nets in Benue. It became impossible for them to continue. They were looking for the easiest way out. They sold that net factory to an individual and took off. That individual has not been able to operate that net. So you see, those are small companies. And you know, the aggregate economic activities in the country is not from the big companies. It's from these small and medium-scale enterprises. That is what enhances the GDP of any country. And that is what you call developed economy, where you have a lot of these small enterprises operating without hindrance. There's no small enterprise here that can operate. It's not possible. Cost of production is prohibitive. The exchange rate is prohibitive. There's no power supply, and a whole lot of issues. Then the purchasing power of individuals is not there, because those individuals have no work. So where do you get the purchasing power to buy the products produced from these persons at very high cost? It is not. So I pray that the incoming government should focus on fixing the power sector. It is not a Gordian knot. Fixing the power sector is not a Gordian knot. It can be fixed. Neither is it is not rocket science. It can be fixed. It's just to have serious individuals who know the power sector and who know what to do and focus on it. That is all that we need to do. And I pray that the incoming government should have one agenda. If you fix the power sector, you fix the education sector, you have fixed the health sector. Because most of the investors in the health sector who ordinarily would have built hospitals with the necessary equipment that we have in developed economies cannot do so. There are certain machines in the health sector that 1 minute of lack of power, they are gone. And they cost a lot of money. So who is going to put that where you woke up one day, they take power more than 100 times? How can that happen? So once you fix power, the health sector will be fixed, education sector will be fixed, because in most of these tertiary institutions, you also have labs that need consistent and constant power supply. You don't have that. So how would those students engage in any meaningful research that will come out with anything meaningful? So power sector is the center of the economy of any country, anywhere in the world.
Are you not worried that the issue of solar should also take preeminence, not just on national grid, not just on the...
That is why I say that the essence of the Royal Electrification Agency was to enhance electricity accessibility for the rural populace. And I have an example. For instance, there are 2 mini grids. One is 100 kilowatt in Benue. It supplies about 200 homes. Those people are happy. If you go there, it's 24/7 power. In those villages, one is 40. These are villages that probably in the next 10, 20 years, national grid will not be able to reach them. So such villages now have power supply that is independent from the national grid. So solar can also be put on the national grid. For instance, I went to Morocco in a place called Gogwazat. It's a desert area. The biggest power plant in Morocco is by solar panels. 500, I think about 540 megawatts. Morocco has the biggest solar power plants in the entire world. And it's giving them power. So here, with this amendment of the Constitution, most individuals, especially in the far north, where sun rays is very high, in the places like Sokoto, Jigawa, Borno, all those places, you might decide that it's okay, I want to build an embedded power plant for Borno State. And then you go and do 100 megawatts of solar power plant that can supply only to Maiduguri. And you are making your own money. You can decide to expand it. So even the federal government can decide to build mini solar power plants maybe 250 megawatts here, you can also put that to the grid and enhance the grid supply. But there again, the grid itself has some issues. You need to fix a proper grid so that you can reduce the technical losses that are associated with the lack of maintenance of the national grid. So there is a whole lot of things that need to do. Even when you generate, for instance, we have an installed capacity of between 12 to 13,000 megawatts of electricity in this country. They can't even send up to 7,000 to the grid. They try to send 5,000 on a few occasions. I collapsed the grid because the grid has no capacity to take that volume of electricity from the generators. So we need investment in the grid itself
to be able to evacuate
to be able to evacuate enough power. We have installed capacity. The generators we have can give us between 12 to 13,000 megawatts of power. Unfortunately, the national grid can't even take 5,000. It can't take 5,000 of 5,000 megawatts. Few times they have tried it, it collapsed. And so what cement is supposed to do is to fix the grid to an extent that at least it can take about 8,000 megawatts of power. That has not been done. So the incoming government should focus on power. And I believe, and I tell you, that if there one agenda is to fix power in this country, you'll be happy to be a Nigerian because a lot of things will come back. People will come in droves to invest here because people are looking for cheap sources, where they can invest their own money and also have return on their investment. Americans moved to China partly because of cheap labor there, and partly because electricity is very stable. If you go to China, a lot of incubators from America and from Europe are in China. They're incubating business ideas in China and also putting them in practice. So when we begin to have enough power here, you have a lot of business incubators here who will come here, incubate ideas, and of course put them in practice. And this country becomes a great country that it's supposed to be. But until power sector is fixed, it will be running in circles.
All right. Now, Mr. Chairman, you will agree with me that in the practice of the Parliament, power sector, the power committee is a very big committee that most times is hardly you see a member of the opposition leading it. But in your case, I believe competence made the leadership to insist that you should head that committee. So will you look back and say you are comfortable and happy with what that committee achieved, especially in terms of oversight of the agencies under you?
Absolutely, I would say so. You know, when they were constituting the committee, and let me first say that I'm grateful to the Senate President of the Senate who deemed it fit to appoint me as the chair of that committee. Like you said, Power Committee is one of the biggest in the National Assembly. Ordinarily, I shouldn't come to an opposition party. But when he called me and said that he was putting me as chair of the committee, he told me something. He said, look, you are the one who knows about power in this Senate more than any one of us. And we believe that you will bring your experience to bear on what is happening in the power sector. That was the basis for which I was appointed chair of the committee. You know, I had chaired the committee in the House of Reps while I was a member of the House of Reps. I was also a director of the NIPP power plants for 8 years while I was governor because the state government have put in a lot of investment in Niger Delta Power Holding Company in building those thermal power plants. So each zone will nominate a governor to be on the board of the Niger Delta Power Holding Company. And I was nominated to represent the North Central for 8 years. So I know a lot about the power sector. And so the president of the Senate were in the House of Reps together while I was chair of the power committee. So he knows that I have some knowledge, and that was the basis for which I was appointed. And we've done quite a lot based on what I know. Like, for instance, I'm mentioning the issue of the electricity bill. Nobody has thought about a comprehensive electricity bill for the country. A country like Nigeria doesn't have an electricity bill. You have each agency have a law regulating that agency in the power sector. You need a compendium that when you pick one compendium, everything about the power sector is encompassing that. We've been able to do that. We've also been able to hold public hearings that have changed a lot of what used to happen in the power sector. And for the agencies and the stakeholders, knowing that in the National Assembly, the people who are manning this committee have some knowledge. They cannot be bamboozled into the wrong thing. That has also helped in streamlining what is happening in the power sector. So I would say that I'm grateful to the Senate President and the leadership for appointing me the chair. And I'm grateful to members of my committee who have contributed in making some changes in the power sector. So yes, I'm satisfied with what I have done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, this is where we'll draw the curtain on this episode of the program, The Standing Committees. Well, our viewers, we've heard it, we've seen it. These are the Chairman Senate Committee on Power. Senator Gabril Suswam has reeled out all the achievements of the Senate Committee on Power in the last 4 years, and some of them are quite visible. You know, he has particularly stressed on the electricity bill, which he initiated, and what it entails for the power sector, and some of the engagement that they've actually undertaken include the one that produced the intervention in the mass metering, which you and I, Nigerians today, will say it's an improved development. And it's at this point in time we'll now call it a day on this program, the Standing Committees. I am Ignatius Nkwo. Join us again for another exciting edition. Bye for now.